Radames is a disease. Radames is something, that's me. Well, okay, so here we are. We have no idea. We're just here for you, okay? So really, I think the important thing is to say, first of all, thank you very much for taking the time out of your lives to come and be with us. Without you guys, we're just people at home twiddling our thumbs, you know? So, meaning that really, the love and the attention and the time that you've put in to watching the series and then taking your time to come here, it's a special thing and it's a reciprocal thing. We're here for you, you're here for us, and the magic happens with that agreement. And thank you so much for being here. So, just want to say that to start with.
Yes, thank you, because if it wasn't for people like you that keep the show current and active, we wouldn't get invitations to come see you all. So seeing so many people here, for us, we feel extremely blessed that we had this opportunity not only to come today, but to actually be a part of something that is much bigger than ourselves and has affected so many lives, and it keeps the spirit and the message of what the show was all about moving forward into new generations.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a phenomenal thing that a show that was on TV that long ago has what I guess the Hollywood term is, it has legs. You know, it's continued to walk into the future, and that's a real testimony to the artistry, the creativity, the genius that Michael Landon, you know, possessed and shared with the world. He was lucky that he was on Bonanza before that, and that he was ambitious and smart enough to present this idea to take Laura's books and turn them into a television series. And with the working with the Friendly family who owned the property, he was able to develop the show and embellish it and expand it and bring in new characters, and you know better than I do how well he was able to depict the essential ingredients of communal life, you know, life in a small town. I live in France now, and when I first visited there 5 years ago, just after the last Walnut Grove get-together, I went to France for the second time. The first time I'd only been in Paris, and everybody thinks of France as the Eiffel Tower and croissants and wine, right? Wine and cheese. Well, and art, right? But you get outside of Paris and you take a train, which I did, across the countryside, and guess what? It looks exactly like Minnesota. It's farms and town after, well, they call them villages there, village after village. A little bit older than the towns in Minnesota, but it's the same thing. It's farmland and a village. Farmland and a village. Little House runs 4 times a day, every day, on national television in France. Why is it so popular there? Because it's about the same values, the same interactions between members of a community, the school, the church, the store, the mill, the doctor, and the farmers, and how everyone gets along and raises families and struggles with the truths and hardships of life and is there for each other, supporting each other to go forward in life. And that's some of the main themes of Little House, and it's true. It takes place in every small town in America and every small town in the Western world. So Landon captured that on film in a really truthful, heartfelt way, and this is why there are so many people who resonate with it. Take it away.
Yeah, I mean, when my sister and I first started, and we filmed the pilot when we had just turned 3. I mean, and we pretty much grew up on the set, and everybody, you know, watched us grow up. But when we were on the set, I thought that this was normal. I thought everybody did this. And it wasn't until I got, you know, to be in probably around first grade that I noticed that it was different. I wasn't always in class and everything. So, but I do get a lot of questions about how did we work school, and how did we do our homework and stuff like that. So we had tutors on the set. We had to clock in to the teachers and the social workers, and if you had to go work, they would clock you out, and you could take a nice long lazy stroll back to the classroom, but that didn't help you any because they clocked you back in and you had mandatory time you had to do.
3 hours. You had to be in school for 3 hours a day on the set, no matter what. Even if it was like I was saying, if it was broken up by being on, shooting a scene, you had to come back and you were still obliged to do, and that's the California law that said that. So every got 3 hours, except in the summer vacation, then there was no school.
Right, and even if you were done for the day, but you hadn't done your 3 hours, you would change, and then you would go finish your 3 hours out before you could go home for the day, before you're allowed to leave. So, but, I still am acclimating this weekend to being solo. I'm usually always with my sister, but the benefit for me this weekend is I can tell you everything you loved about Carrie. That was all me. She's not here to dispute it.
I won't tell her you said that.
We have an argument about that. Okay, so her question, if you didn't hear it, was who was nailed to the roof by Mr. Edwards and Moz Holiday.
Yeah.
And we both think we did that. So I think what happened is when you're a child, you can only work for so many hours. If you're under probably about 12, I think it's about 3 hours. So they hired us as twins. Because they would give one of us a call time in the morning, and that one would be on call for 3 hours, and then you'd break for lunch, and the other one would have a call time for after lunch and do the remaining 3 hours. It is completely possible that they started filming that scene before they actually broke for lunch, but didn't finish it, and so they came back to finish it, and the other twin finished out the day. Now the actual footage that you see, I've given it to is Lindsay that's up there, but we both have memories of doing it because probably at some point we were swapped up, and both sat up there. So.
You're both right.
Yeah, you're both right.
Okay.
Oh. That's another funny story. So the actual footage you see is me, Sidney, and that's like the 5 minutes I'll never live down in my lifetime, because even if somebody has never seen the show, they've seen that 5 minutes. But they actually got Lindsay to do that first, and Lindsay ran down and fell and wouldn't do it again, so they were like, go get the other one. So I went and did it, and I fell. And I wouldn't do it again either. So that was
You weren't supposed to fall?
No. Oh. In fact, you can see the hill was really steep, and you can see if you watch it closely, when I start running, I start getting totally out of control. My body is moving faster than my legs can go, and at one point my arms are over here and I'm going that way. And I remember my mom was standing down by the camera, and when I get up, I have like a little bit of like flour in my fingers, and I look down and I hear my mom, and she's like, come on honey, run! Run, honey, and I looked down and I'm like, no. So that's probably one of the things that I remember the most, is seeing my mom trying to coax me into running again, and I was like, no.
And thus a classic moment of television was created.
How did you learn lines when you were so young?
It's the same way.
How did you learn lines when you were so young is the question.
Yeah, it's a lot of little kids have like in kindergarten stuff like that, they have Christmas pageants and stuff, and they really learn like the song or whatever it is that they're doing through repetition and through coaching. So whether we were at home or we were on the set, usually my mom was trying to get us ready for whatever it was that we needed to do, and a lot of it very honestly was a little bit improvisational, because we had great actors around us as kids, that could kind of mold and blend to whatever reaction we gave. So an example of what I mean is like in Ma's Holiday, where Mr. Edward sits down on the bed and Carrie crawls out and she says boo. And really that was the only instruction, is just come up and say boo, right? But because Victor French was such a great actor and so skilled, he could actually mold that scene by what he did and how he got me to interact with him to make it the scene that it was. And so for being so young on the set, we were very fortunate to have people around us that you don't see them doing it, but as the scene is progressing, they're kind of like pushing you in the direction that they want you to go, you know. And Michael was very good at that too. Whenever he was holding us or whatever, he would make sure that, you know, he was interacting with us as well as interacting with like Mr. Olson or Mrs. Olson or whatever, and that helped us stay active, you know, in the role.
He also did that for older actors too, Michael. Even when I was working on the episode His Father's Son, there was a scene where I had to break down and cry at one point, and I was having a little trouble getting to that emotional spot as an actor. And Michael took a moment and asked, he said, you know, can the crew take 5? And he and I walked off the set a little ways. We were out shooting outside in Northern California. And he took the time to walk with me and told me a very sad story. He said, listen to me and tell you a sad story. He told me a very sad story about some friends of his and their son who was dying of cancer and this kind of thing. And I was, of course, I understood what he was doing, but I participated in that process with him. And in doing so, I finally found my heart opening, and I began to cry too. And he said, okay, are you now ready to do the scene? And I said, yes. And so we walked back to the set, and he said, okay, roll camera. And so he was willing to go through all these extra efforts to bring the best out of his actors, which is why there are so many authentic moments of emotionally authentic moments in the show, largely through the work that he and the other directors that he hired to work on the show. They were able to bring the best out of us. You know, that was his standard that he set.
Both. Okay, well, I'll start. What shows have I done besides Little House? Well, before my sister and I were cast on Little House, we did a movie called Sunshine with Cliff DeYoung and Christina Raines. And it was another book adaptation into a movie about a young woman who had a young daughter, and she develops cancer in her leg. And her choice is to either amputate her leg, or eventually the cancer will kill her. And she decides to keep her leg, and through the months that the book is written about, she leaves these videotapes and legacy to her daughter Jill, so that she'll have it for the future. And I did that before. We did several commercials during Little House and before, and then afterwards I was very fortunate to work with Alan Hale Jr., who was the skipper on Gilligan's Island, and he and I did a co-starring spot on Hambone and Hilly, which was a movie about a dog. It's kind of like the movie Homeward Bound, where he gets separated from his master, and he goes all the way across the country and meets all these different individual people, and then finally gets reconnected with Lelaine Gish. But the funny thing about that movie is that they did a takeoff of O.J. Simpson running through the airport trying to catch the dog, because he did the Samsonite commercial at that time, was so popular, you know. So, but Alan Hale Jr. was wonderful to work with. He was, sometimes it was funny because he would forget his lines, or like there was a line like, I had to ask him if I could keep the dogs, but it was, can I keep them? And so one time when I said, can I keep him? He goes, keep what? And I'm like, the puppies. And I just did this like improv thing. And after they said cut, he was like, Thanks, kid. You really saved me on that one.
Some of you might know that before I did Little House, I was on a series called Kung Fu. Some of the younger people out here may not remember that show. Maybe half of you maybe don't even know the show, but many of you have heard the phrase, grasshopper, or patience, grasshopper. Well, I played Grasshopper in the original series, and that was a character that was originally, the name was Kwai Chang Caine. He was a half American, half Chinese monk studying in a Chinese monastery as a child, and had a shaved head. I went to school in 8th grade with a bald head, which was no fun in 1973, let me tell you. So I was on Kung Fu. I did a lot of guest starring roles. The very first TV show that I ever did, after a movie that I did with Anthony Quinn, playing his dying son, was a TV show called Medical Center. And guess who was also doing his first TV role in that show? O.J. Simpson. The infamous O.J. Simpson. I did a lot of, once Hollywood is kind of typecasting, you've heard that term typecasting. What that means is once you play a certain role, you get known or hired to play another version of that same role in a way. So having first started out as a boy who's dying of a rheumatic heart, Anthony Quinn's son, the movie was called A Dream of Kings, 1969. I did a series of roles where I was troubled in some way. I was either handicapped or dying or troubled in the head. And then actually playing or an odd character like Chinese monk, on Kung Fu. So Little House really represented the first kind of all-American role that I ever had to play, although he was a sensitive poet character, so there's that too. But it was a good chance to have my hair long for a change, and just be an upstanding, well, in the beginning, upstanding teenager, which, by the way, that's how the character was written, to be a good guy. And some of you may know the backstory, the thing that happened with Victor French, where the whole family got written out of the show, and that's one of the reasons why my character suddenly becomes unfaithful to Mary. It wasn't really the way it started out, but that's how the writers changed it for reasons that had to do with more things going on behind the scenes than the actual character. John Jr. would never have cheated on Mary. I'm sorry. He just would not have. But, look, I'm sure living in more rural city environments, more towns, some people, stories of family, friends, somebody goes to the big city and kind of loses their way for a little while. And that's kind of what happened to John Jr. He was in water above his head, and this pretty society girl, kind of wrapped him around her little pinky, and pretty soon, he doesn't know which end is up. And I think that happens to a lot of people who suddenly find themselves in circumstances that they don't understand. So we'll have to forgive John Jr. He didn't mean to do this. More questions, anybody?
Michael Lannon was known to play pranks and stuff on the kids on the set. Anything that you had happen that you want to share?
Well, it wasn't just the kids. He pulled pranks on pretty much everybody. But for us kids, the creek that runs next to the house, it was man-made. It wasn't a real creek. But after we had been there for a while, there was real pollywogs and frogs and stuff in it. And Michael knew that we would be so amazed by this. But we would go and find these frogs that were probably like about the size of a quarter, maybe a little bit bigger. And we'd take it to Michael and be like, put it in your mouth, put it in your mouth. And he would actually take the frogs and put them in his mouth and act like he ate the frog. And then I know another time, there was a woman that was a script lady, and she always kept her cigarettes they have a bag on the side of the chair she had her script in. She kept her cigarettes in there, and he caught this spider one time, and he put it in her cigarette box. Yeah, he was always doing stuff like that.
Keeping it fresh.
And something about a monster in the wood box by the barn or something. I've heard of.
Oh yeah, the woodshed by the barn. So there was the space between the houses, and if you look right at the barn door, there's that wood box with the flip-up lid, and he always told us there was a monster in there, not to flip up the lid and look in there. We're like, I don't hear anything.
So you never opened it?
No, I don't think I ever did, especially not after the werewolf Halloween one.
Oh yeah.
Chained in the barn.
Once you saw that there was a spider in a cigarette box, you kind of knew he was capable of anything.
Right.
What about the time when you both appeared, you and your sister appeared on the show together?
The God Sister.
Right, Alyssa, I think it was.
No, Alyssa.
Which one did Alyssa and which one did Carrie?
Because we couldn't decide, we did a 50-50 split.
Oh, that's
So, yeah. So when Carrie finds the big penny, that's me as Carrie. When we go to heaven, that's me as Alyssa.
okay.
When the spider chases Carrie, that's my sister as Carrie, and I think that might be the heaven scene too. And then when I'm hugging Jack, that's me with Jack in heaven. So there's the one where she makes the berries really big and the spider chases her. That's my sister as Carrie, and then with Jack in heaven, that's me as Carrie. And then there's another time where we're running through the meadow, and then Alyssa disappears, and that's me as Alyssa and my sister as Carrie. But I remember, like, when we were on the big giant penny, a lot of that was done with special effects, and it was my first experience with what they call a green screen. So basically the idea behind a green screen is that everything you see is painted green, and then they have like another image on a camera that kind of attaches to that color and lays over top of it. So the berries that my sister had to pick up and like take a bite of for that scene was actually a bunch of balloons, and so she had to fake like biting this balloon and get berry juice on her face, you know. And so that's one episode that I really remember, not just because Carrie was the star of it with Alyssa and we got to work together, but because it was technology at that time, which is really antiquated now with all the computer stuff, but it was like considered cutting edge at the time, and we got to like partake in it and see it and experience it. It was really a unique experience.
Did you have any say in which scenes you were in or which your sister was in?
We used to talk about it, but I think that I used to kind of give her choice, and it was sometimes it'd be like, okay, you do this script, I'll do that one, kind of thing. When we were a lot younger, it was more based on who's napping and who's not fussy and who's fussy now. Because my mom will be the first one to tell you when I was younger, if I just woke up for a nap, I'm not doing anything for an hour. Like, don't touch me, don't talk to me. You know, so every once in a while she'd have me work in the morning, and she'd put my sister on for the afternoon because she knew that she could get my sister out of the nap and she wouldn't be as ornery as I would be. I would get. It took me a long time to wake up, I guess, when I was a kid.
It's good to know that other people. Well, yes, back there was two quick. In the back first, if you don't mind, behind you, and then you go ahead, lady, the girl with the pink shirt hat on. Yes.
Do you remember what was really in the rattlesnake stew that Mr. Edwards made? Like that he cooked for you? Do you remember what was really in it?
Say it again. What about
What was in the
Really
rattlesnake?
in the rattlesnake stew that he made?
Oh yeah, when he shot
It
them.
looked like she enjoyed it. She was like eating it all.
That's a pretty funny. Okay, so her question's on Ma's Holiday again when Mr. Edwards shoots the rattlesnake and he makes rattlesnnake stew, and Carrie's eating it and she's like playing with the rattle. It was really chicken gravy. It wasn't really rattlesnake, but I look like I'm just having the best time of my life. It was like all over my face.
And then in front of this.
How did Carrie get in the basket with the air balloon going up in the air?
Oh, that's actually a really wonderful story. So, my father is an actor, and my mom always took us to work because my dad would usually be filming on location. Thank you. Yeah, so my dad would usually be filming on location. So sometimes he'd be in Tennessee or somewhere, because he usually got recruited for every Elvis movie that came down the pike because he looks like Vernon Presley. But anyways, we filmed the balloon scene in what's called Old Tucson, which is a western town in Arizona that was used for a lot of different locations. And because my mom's family was there in Phoenix, they planned a family vacation around it. So it was one of the rare times that my dad actually went to the set with us. And the balloon, when it goes up, it was on a crane. It wasn't a real balloon. But what you can't see is at my feet is my dad. He's in the basket with me, and that was the only way that I would do it. I wouldn't go up by myself. And amazingly, to this day, I was not harnessed in that basket, and I'm supposed to be, leaning over and waving. So thank God.
Your dad was the harness.
Right. Yeah. So, but that's one of my favorite memories, because there's only about 3 or 4 times he was ever on the set with us, and he happened to be there that day, and he did that scene with me.
I watched that show. It was just together.
Well, folks, if there's no other questions, we're gonna go sign pictures.
All right, thank
Okay
you.
with you guys?
Yeah, so much.
Sure.
Let's